morning. Welcome back to Thinking Matters, Adult Discipleship Hour. This is Memorial Day 2020. And because it's Memorial Day, we're just going to look at a one short piece about the importance of remembering things. We live in a postmodern world where often traditions and things of the past are seen in a very negative fashion, and we look to recreate something new and fresh every day. And there's nothing totally wrong with that, but we do have to be careful what it is that we forget. In Deuteronomy, in chapter 8, the title in the passage is "Do Not Forget the Lord." And then the whole passage is talking about circumstances of life which would make us forget something, especially when things are moving forward in a new fashion. It says here, "When you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land he's given you. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I'm giving to you this day." I think for each of us, forgetting what's behind us and moving forward, there's sometimes a value in that, but there's sometimes that we leave behind. So as we move forward in the midst of the COVID change of life, we're going to have to be careful about what it is we leave behind and what it is that we need to bring forward and the reasons why. Why would we no longer do that, or why should we continue to do it, are good questions that each of us should ask, especially around our spiritual lives and our church life. How do we meet? What do we bring forward? What do we leave behind? It'll be very important in the weeks, months, and potentially years ahead, all in the context of not forgetting the Lord. And the way we best remember the Lord is through the scriptures. That's where he's delineated in a concrete verbal fashion for us to understand, comprehend, and to be changed by. And so as we move forward to this morning in our time together, it may not be morning for you, it could be evening. We've finished the book of Romans, and we're now going to pick up in the book of Titus, which is a short book. And I just want to take one verse today and read it to you. It says, Paul, this is the first verse, Paul, a servant of God and an apostle of Jesus Christ, for the faith of God's elect and the knowledge of the truth that leads to godliness. Just like to think about that for a minute. So knowledge is things that we know. Have you ever played the game Trivial Pursuit? Well, it's trivia. It doesn't really affect what we do. People think of it as sort of useless facts. But we don't want our knowledge of who God is to be a useless fact. We want it to change the way we live and move. And in this passage, Paul is referencing that, and he said that, and the knowledge of the truth, in other words, understanding reality, that information, that leads to godliness. So we're changed. We become more like God because of the things we know. They're not trivial. I would ask you to ask yourself, what are the things in life that you know about God that are actually changing how you live? And one of the ways you could recognize that best would be look at what the cultural response to something is. Pick a question, any question. And often the cultural response will be worth thinking about. Do we take on that response, or do we have a more biblical response? Let's just talk about marriage, parenting, education, government, abortion. You can name the topic. Think of what the cultural view is. Is your view exactly the same, or has your knowledge of God altered how you view and therefore how you live? If we go back one book from Titus to Timothy, in Timothy chapter 3, Paul is talking about the fact that, it's not Timothy chapter 3. It's in 1 Timothy chapter 4. Paul is talking about hanging on to things that are good. He's saying to Timothy, have nothing to do with godless myths and old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. That same notion of growing and being like God. That it's been said that imitation is the best form of flattery. And so we're trying to imitate the best we can. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. Godliness is useful in our everyday life. We want to live and think like God does. We want our knowledge of God to not be trivial pursuit. We want it to be meaningful. And then that transcends into the next life, where we understand and we enjoy even a more clear picture of who God is. So my challenge to you this week would be to think about the issues that you see in the culture. They might be in the front lines of the newspaper, they may be around COVID, they may be around our president, and really think about because you know God, how do you see that? Do you see it differently than other people? And additionally, when you're in a situation, do you react different than most people? Most people, when they're in a difficult situation, they look to either run or they look to win, destroy, and conquer. And so that's not what we would want to do. We would want to think carefully about how to forgive and to love and to be selfless in those conflicts. And so as you do that, don't forget the past. Remember, bring forward what's necessary, and have a good day.